The lawyers had barely finished reading my father's will when my brother Marcus started laughing. Not a subtle chuckle, but the kind of deep, satisfied laugh that echoed through the mahogany-paneled conference room like victory bells. I sat there, holding the small snow globe in my trembling hands, watching the fake snow settle around a tiny Victorian house while my entire world crumbled. 23 years of being the dutiful daughter, and this was my inheritance, a cheap souvenir that looked like it came from a gas station gift shop. "I guess Dad finally showed us who really mattered," Marcus said, already pulling out his phone to call his wife with the good news. The empire, 12 companies, real estate across 3 continents, investments worth more than some small country's GDP, all his. And me, I got a snow globe. A snow globe and a note that simply said, "Sometimes the smallest gifts hold the greatest treasures, my dear Emma." I wanted to throw it against the wall, watch it shatter into 1,000 pieces like my heart already had. But something made me pause. My father had never been a sentimental man. Every gift, every gesture, every word had always carried purpose. As the fake snow swirled again from my shaking hands, I noticed something I'd missed before. The base wasn't solid. There was a seam, barely visible, running along the bottom edge. If you're watching this and you've ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or forgotten by the people who should have valued you most, I need you to stay with me. Because what I discovered when I finally found the courage to open that snow globe didn't just change my life. It revealed a truth about my family that had been hidden for decades. And trust me, by the end of this story, you'll understand why sometimes the smallest inheritance can be worth more than an empire. But first, hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories about hidden truths and unexpected justice. Because what happened next will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. My name is Emma Whitmore, though for most of my life, I might as well have been invisible. In the Whitmore family, there were 2 types of people: the ones who mattered and the ones who served those who mattered. Marcus, my older brother by 3 years, had been groomed since birth to take over our father's business empire. He had the sharp jawline, the commanding presence, the ruthless ambition that my father admired. He went to Harvard Business School, just like Dad. He married Victoria, a senator's daughter, in a wedding that made the society pages of every major newspaper. He had 2 perfect children who were already enrolled in the most exclusive private schools before they could even walk properly. And then there was me, Emma, the afterthought, the one who loved books more than balance sheets, who studied art history instead of economics, who spent her summers volunteering at homeless shelters instead of interning at Fortune 500 companies. My father used to introduce Marcus as my son, the future of Whitmore Industries, and me as, and this is Emma, she's also here. The dismissals started early, so early that I can't even remember a time when they weren't part of my daily life. When I was 7, I drew a picture of our family that won first place in a school art competition. I ran home bursting with pride, the blue ribbon clutched in my small hand. My father was in his study with Marcus, teaching him how to read stock reports. "Not now, Emma," he said without looking up. "This is important." I waited outside that door for 3 hours. He never came out to see my ribbon. Marcus did, though. He took one look at it and said, "Art is for people who can't do real work." He was 10 years old, and already he knew exactly how to cut me down to size. By the time I was in high school, the family dynamics were set in stone. Marcus was the crown prince. I was the spare part nobody needed. Family dinners were exercises in humiliation. My father would spend the entire meal discussing business strategies with Marcus while I sat silently, moving food around my plate. On the rare occasions when I tried to contribute to the conversation, I was met with condescending smiles and patronizing pats on the head. "That's sweet, Emma, but you wouldn't understand the complexities of international finance," my father would say. "Why don't you tell us about your little art projects instead?" My little art projects. That's what he called my passion, my dreams, my entire identity. When I got accepted to Yale's art history program, Marcus laughed so hard he nearly choked on his champagne. Art history? What are you going to do with that? Organize museum gift shops?" The whole family laughed along with him. Even my mother, who had once quietly encouraged my artistic interests, said nothing in my defense. She had learned long ago that in the Whitmore household, you were either with Marcus or you were nobody. The cruelty wasn't always so overt. Sometimes it was in the smaller things, the 1,000 little cuts that slowly bled you dry. Like how every family photo in our mansion featured Marcus prominently while I was always slightly out of focus, pushed to the edge of the frame. Or how my birthday was consistently forgotten while Marcus's was celebrated with elaborate parties that made it into the business sections of newspapers. Or how my room was the smallest in our 30-room mansion, tucked away in a corner like an embarrassing secret, while Marcus had an entire wing to himself. I remember one Christmas when I was 19. I had spent months working on a painting of our family estate, capturing the way the morning light hit the old oak trees, the way the shadows played across the stone facade. It was the best work I had ever done, and I was so proud of it. I wrapped it carefully and placed it under the tree for my father. When he opened it on Christmas morning, he stared at it for a long moment. For just a second, I thought I saw something soft in his eyes, something that looked almost like pride. Then Marcus said, "Wow, Emma, did you paint that yourself or did you trace it?" The room erupted in laughter, and my father set the painting aside without a word. I found it later in the trash, the canvas torn down the middle. That was the moment I truly understood that no matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, I would never be good enough for them. Marcus had won a game I didn't even know we were playing, and the prize was our father's love, respect, and eventually his entire fortune. College was my escape. For 4 years, I could pretend I was just Emma, not Emma Whitmore, the disappointing daughter of a billionaire. I made friends who liked me for who I was, not for my last name or my family's money. I fell in love with a boy named Daniel who worked at the campus bookstore and wrote poetry that made me cry. I discovered I was actually good at something. I had an eye for authenticating artwork, for spotting forgeries that fooled even experienced collectors. My professors said I had a gift, that I could have a real career in art authentication and restoration. But then graduation came, and with it, reality. My father made it clear that there was no place for me in the family business. "Marcus is the future of this company," he said. "You should find yourself a nice husband, settle down, have some children. That's what women in our family do." When I told him about my job offer from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, he actually laughed. "Playing with paintings? That's not a career, Emma. That's a hobby for bored housewives." Marcus was even crueler. "The Met? How much did Dad have to donate to get them to offer you that job?" The truth was, my father hadn't donated anything. I had earned that position on my own merit, but nobody in my family believed that was possible. In their minds, I was incapable of achieving anything without the Whitmore name opening doors for me. I took the job anyway. For 5 years, I lived in a small apartment in Queens, working long hours for a modest salary, and I was happier than I had ever been in my life. I was good at my job, respected by my colleagues, valued for my expertise. I dated a few men who saw me as Emma, the art historian, not Emma, the billionaire's daughter. I thought I had finally escaped my family's shadow. But you can never really escape family, can you? They pull you back like gravity, especially when there's a funeral involved. My father's death was sudden. A heart attack at his desk, working until the very end, just the way he would have wanted it. I flew back home for the funeral, slipping back into my role as the invisible daughter with practiced ease. Marcus gave the eulogy, of course, speaking about legacy and empire and the Whitmore name living forever. I sat in the back row, wondering if anyone would even notice if I left early. The will reading was scheduled for the day after the funeral. I almost didn't go. What was the point? I knew Marcus would get everything. It had been predetermined since the day he was born with a Y chromosome, and I wasn't. But my mother insisted I attend. "Your father wanted all family members present," she said. though she couldn't quite meet my eyes when she said it. So there I sat in that conference room, surrounded by lawyers and financial advisors, and Marcus with his perfect wife and perfect children, as our father's attorney read through the will with the dramatic flair of someone who knew they were about to drop a bombshell. To my son, Marcus Alexander Whitmore, I leave the entirety of Whitmore Industries, including all subsidiaries, real estate holdings, investment portfolios, and associated assets, valued at approximately $4.7 billion. Marcus nodded as if he were accepting a crown that had always been his by divine right. Victoria squeezed his hand, already calculating how many more houses they could buy, how many more private jets they could acquire. To my daughter, Emma Rose Whitmore, I leave this. The attorney reached into a box and pulled out the snow globe. The silence in the room was deafening. Then Marcus started laughing. That cruel, triumphant laugh that I had heard so many times throughout my childhood. A snow globe? He left her a snow globe? He picked it up, shaking it mockingly. Look, Emma, it's snowing. Maybe you can sell it on eBay for $50. Don't spend it all in one place. The attorneys looked uncomfortable. My mother stared at her hands. Victoria smirked behind her perfectly manicured fingers. And I sat there, holding that cheap, ridiculous snow globe, feeling like I was 7 years old again, standing outside my father's study with my blue ribbon, waiting for him to care. There's also a note, the attorney said, handing me a sealed envelope. I opened it with numb fingers. My father's handwriting, sharp and precise as always. Sometimes the smallest gifts hold the greatest treasures, my dear Emma. Your grandfather knew this. I hope someday you will understand. My grandfather. He had died when I was 5, and I barely remembered him. He had been the one who built the Whitmore empire from nothing, starting with a single grocery store and building it into a Fortune 500 company. My father had inherited it all and expanded it even further. But what did he have to do with this snow globe? I left the office building in a daze, Marcus's laughter still echoing in my ears. Don't forget your inheritance, Emma, he called after me. Wouldn't want to leave $50 on the table. Back in my childhood room, I sat on my bed staring at the snow globe. It was genuinely ugly, a plastic base painted to look like wood, a glass dome that was slightly lopsided, and, inside, a miniature Victorian house that looked like it had been mass-produced in some factory. The snow was just white plastic flakes that moved sluggishly through what was probably corn syrup mixed with water. This was my inheritance. This was what 23 years of being a Whitmore daughter was worth. I shook it angrily, watching the snow swirl, and that's when I noticed it again. That seam along the base. It was so faint, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. I ran my finger along it, feeling for a catch or a release. Nothing. I tried twisting the base. Nothing. I was about to give up when I remembered something my grandfather had told me during one of his rare visits when I was very young. The best secrets, little Emma, are hidden in plain sight, but they only reveal themselves to those who look with their hearts, not their eyes. Look with your heart. What did that mean? I stared at the snow globe, really looked at it this time, the Victorian house inside. There was something familiar about it, the way the windows were arranged, the peculiar turret on the left side, the wraparound porch. I had seen this house before, but where? Then it hit me. The painting, the one I had found in the attic when I was 12, covered in dust and spider webs. It was a painting of a house, signed E.W. 1952, E.W. Edward Whitmore, my grandfather. I had asked my father about it once, but he had dismissed it. Your grandfather fancied himself an artist before he got serious about business. Forget about it. But I hadn't forgotten. That painting had been beautiful, haunting even, and the house in it looked exactly like the one in this snow globe. I picked up the globe again, studying it more carefully. There, barely visible on the base of the little house, were tiny numbers: 42.3601 DN, 71.00589 DW coordinates. My heart started racing. This wasn't just a snow globe, it was a map. I grabbed my laptop and typed in the coordinates. They led to an address in Boston in the historic Beacon Hill neighborhood. According to Google Street View, it was a Victorian house, the exact house from the snow globe and my grandfather's painting. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was what I found when I researched the address. The house was registered under a trust, the ERW Trust, established in 1955. ERW Emma Rose Whitmore. My initials. My grandfather had set up a trust in my name 3 decades before I was even born. My hands were shaking as I continued searching. The trust owned not just the house, but several other properties, all purchased between 1952 and 1975, the year my grandfather died. There were also investment accounts, art collections, and safety deposit boxes in banks across New England. All of it hidden, all of it in my name, all of it waiting. But why? Why had my grandfather done this? And why had my father kept it secret all these years, only to reveal it through this ridiculous snow globe? I needed answers, and I knew I wouldn't find them sitting in my childhood room. I booked a flight to Boston for the next morning, telling no one where I was going. Marcus was too busy taking inventory of his new empire to notice I had left. The house on Beacon Hill was even more beautiful in person than in the snow globe. 3 stories of perfectly preserved Victorian architecture with the same turret, the same wraparound porch, the same distinctive windows. I stood on the sidewalk staring up at it, wondering if I was dreaming. "Can I help you?" A voice behind me made me jump. I turned to see an elderly man in a well-tailored suit looking at me with curious but kind eyes. I'm looking for information about this house," I stammered. "Ah, the Whitmore house. Are you a historian? We get a few every year, interested in the architecture." "The Whitmore house?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. The man studied me more carefully. "You're Emma, aren't you? Emma Rose Whitmore?" I nodded, too stunned to speak. "I've been waiting for you for a very long time. My name is Charles Brennan. I was your grandfather's attorney and, I suppose you could say, the keeper of his secrets. Please, come inside. There's so much you need to know." The interior of the house was like stepping back in time. Every piece of furniture, every painting, every book was exactly as it had been in 1975. "Your grandfather instructed that nothing be changed until you came," Charles explained. "He knew you would come eventually." "But how? How did he know about me? I wasn't even born when he died." Charles smiled sadly. "Your grandfather was a remarkable man, Miss Whitmore. He saw things others didn't. He knew your father would have a daughter, and he knew that daughter would be overlooked. He had seen how your father treated your Aunt Catherine." "Aunt Catherine? I don't have an Aunt Catherine." "No, you wouldn't know about her. She died young, before your father married your mother. She was brilliant, creative, everything your father wasn't. And Edward loved her fiercely. But your father... Well, your father believed the family business was no place for women. He pushed Catherine aside, belittled her, broke her spirit. She died in a car accident when she was 25, but Edward always believed it was suicide. She had been so unhappy, so broken by your father's cruelty." I felt tears stinging my eyes. Another invisible Whitmore woman, erased from family history. "Edward never forgave your father for what happened to Catherine," Charles continued. "He knew your father would never change, would never value a daughter the way she deserved to be valued. So he made preparations. He built this shadow inheritance, hidden from your father, waiting for you." "But the snow globe, how did my father know about it?" That was the genius of Edward's plan. He left instructions in his will, sealed instructions that were only to be opened upon your father's death. Your father never knew about any of this while he was alive. The snow globe was in a safety deposit box with instructions that it be given to you as your inheritance. Your father's attorney was legally bound to follow those instructions, no matter how strange they seemed. Charles led me to a study on the second floor. The walls were covered with paintings, and I gasped when I recognized them. They were all signed E.W., Edward Whitmore. My grandfather hadn't just fancied himself an artist, he had been genuinely talented. "He painted these for you," Charles said. "Look closer." I stepped forward, examining the paintings more carefully. Each one had something hidden in it, a small figure in the corner, a face in the clouds, initials worked into the landscape. E.R.W. Emma Rose Whitmore. My initials were in every single painting. "He painted your future into existence," Charles said softly. "He couldn't know exactly who you would be, but he knew you would be an artist at heart, just like him. He knew you would see what others couldn't. That's why he made the map a snow globe. Anyone else would have thrown it away, but you would look closer." "But what is all this?" I asked, gesturing around the room. "What did he leave me?" Charles pulled out a thick folder. "Everything your father didn't know about. Edward was a brilliant businessman, but he was also careful. He built Whitmore Industries with your father, that's true. But he also built something else, something separate, something secret. Real estate holdings worth approximately $500 million today. Art collections valued at over $300 million. Investment accounts that have been growing for 70 years, now worth close to $2 billion. And that's not even counting the intellectual property." Intellectual property? Patents, copyrights, trademarks. Your grandfather was an inventor as well as an artist. He held patents on several key technologies that are still generating income today. The revenues have been flowing into the trust for decades, carefully managed and reinvested. I had to sit down. The room was spinning. "So you're telling me—" "I'm telling you that your grandfather left you an inheritance that rivals what your brother received. Perhaps exceeds it, if we're being honest. But more than that, he left you something your father never had: complete independence. This is yours, Emma. Not the family's, not Whitmore Industries. Yours." I thought about Marcus, sitting in his corner office, thinking he had won everything. I thought about all the years of humiliation, of being told I was worthless, of believing I was the lesser child, and now this. "There's more," Charles said. "Your grandfather left letters, hundreds of them. He wrote to you throughout his life, even before you were born. Would you like to read them?" The letters were in a trunk in the attic, carefully preserved and organized by date. The first one was, dated 1952, 23 years before my grandfather died, 47 years before I was born. "To my dear granddaughter," it began. "I don't know your name yet, but I know you will exist. I know because I've seen how my son looks at his sister, how he dismisses her art, her dreams, her very existence. And I know he will have a daughter someday, and he will do the same to her. So I'm writing to you now, across the years, to tell you what he won't. You are valuable. You are worthy. You are loved." I read through the letters, tears streaming down my face. My grandfather had documented his entire life for me, sharing his thoughts, his dreams, his regrets. He wrote about art and business, about love and loss, about the nature of family and legacy. He wrote about Catherine, my forgotten aunt, and how her death had broken his heart. He wrote about watching my father grow harder and colder, focused only on money and power, and he wrote about hope, his hope that someday a granddaughter would read these letters and know that she had been loved long before she was born. In one letter, dated just a month before his death, he wrote, "I've hidden everything in plain sight, my dear one, the houses, the art, the money. It's all waiting for you. But the real treasure isn't in the bank accounts or the real estate. It's in knowing that you were never the lesser child. You were the one I chose. Your father will give your brother the empire built on ambition and greed. But I'm giving you something better, an empire built on love and art and the belief that there's more to life than profit margins. Use it wisely. Live freely. And remember that long before you took your first breath, your grandfather loved you with all his heart." I spent 3 days in that house, reading every letter, examining every painting, discovering all the secrets my grandfather had hidden for me. Charles showed me the full extent of the inheritance, properties in Paris, London, Tokyo, art collections that included lost masterpieces, investment accounts that had been carefully managed for decades. It was overwhelming and wonderful and terrifying all at once. But there was one more surprise waiting for me. In the last box of documents, I found a sealed envelope marked "Open only after you've read everything else." Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small key. The paper had an address, a storage facility in Boston, and a unit number. "One final gift," my grandfather had written, "for when you're ready to show the world who you really are." The storage unit was massive, taking up nearly a quarter of the building, and it was full of paintings. Not my grandfather's paintings, though there were some of those too. These were masterpieces. Real, authentic masterpieces. Monet, Degas, Cassatt, Vermeer, even a small Rembrandt. Hundreds of paintings that museums around the world believed were lost or destroyed. "How?" I breathed, unable to process what I was seeing. Charles, who had accompanied me, smiled. "Your grandfather was one of the monuments men during World War II. He helped recover art stolen by the Nazis, but not all of it made it back to museums. Some pieces he kept safe, waiting for the right person to decide their fate. He knew you would know what to do with them." I stood there, surrounded by billions of dollars worth of art, and I knew exactly what my grandfather meant. These paintings didn't belong in a storage unit. They didn't belong in a private collection. They belonged to the world. But returning them, revealing their existence, that would make headlines around the globe. The quiet, invisible Whitmore daughter would suddenly be the center of the art world's attention. "I need to think," I told Charles. "I need time to process all of this." "Of course," he said. "Take all the time you need. Your grandfather waited 70 years. The paintings can wait a little longer." I returned to my family's mansion that evening, the snow globe tucked safely in my bag. Marcus was holding court in the dining room, champagne flowing, celebrating his new status as CEO of Whitmore Industries. He had already made changes, firing longtime employees he deemed dead weight, canceling the company's charitable programs because business isn't about feelings. "Emma," he called out when he saw me. "Come to beg for a job? I might have an opening in the mailroom." His sycophants laughed on cue. "No," I said quietly. "I just came to get my things." "Your things?" Victoria laughed, her voice sharp as crystal. "What things? This is Marcus's house now. You have no claim to anything here." "She's right," Marcus said, standing up, swaying slightly from the champagne. "Dad left you a snow globe, remember? That's all you get. That's all you deserve. 23 years of being a disappointment, and you got exactly what you earned. Nothing." I looked at him. Really looked at him. He seemed smaller somehow, diminished. All his life he had defined himself by being better than me, by having more than me. What would he be when he discovered the truth? "You're right," I said. "I got exactly what I deserved." I went to my room and packed my few personal belongings. As I was leaving, my mother stopped me in the hallway. "Emma," she said quietly, "I'm sorry. For all of it, I should have stood up for you. I should have protected you. Why didn't you?" She looked away. "I was afraid. Your father, he could be cruel when crossed. And Marcus is just like him. I chose safety over my daughter. I'll regret that for the rest of my life." I wanted to be angry with her, but I just felt sad. Another woman broken by the Whitmore men, taught that silence was safer than resistance. "It's okay, Mom," I said. "I'm okay." "Are you? Where will you go? Do you need money?" "No," I said, thinking of the billions waiting for me. "I'll be fine." I left that night and never looked back. Well, that's not entirely true. I did look back, but only to watch the explosion from a safe distance. It took me 6 months to prepare everything. 6 months to authenticate every painting, to document their provenance, to prepare for the storm that was coming. I worked with Charles and a team of lawyers to set up the Emma Rose Whitmore Foundation for Art Restoration and Preservation. Then, when everything was ready, we made the announcement. The New York Times broke the story: lost masterpieces worth billions discovered by Whitmore heiress. The art world went insane. Museums that had mourned these paintings for decades suddenly had hope of seeing them again. And I wasn't selling them. I was returning them, donating them back to the institutions they had been stolen from, keeping only a few pieces that had been legally purchased by my grandfather. But that wasn't the part that destroyed Marcus. The part that destroyed Marcus was when Forbes magazine did a profile on me and discovered the full extent of my inheritance. The secret Whitmore fortune. How Emma Whitmore inherited more than her brother knew existed. The article detailed everything: the real estate, the investments, the patents. It revealed that while Marcus had inherited $4.7 billion, I had inherited assets worth nearly $6 billion. The worthless daughter, the disappointment, the one who got a snow globe. I was wealthier than the golden sun. Marcus called me, screaming so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "This is impossible. You're lying. You're committing fraud. I'll sue you. I'll destroy you." "With what money?" I asked calmly. "Your inheritance? The one that's now tied up in the failing company you've been running into the ground with your innovative leadership? How's that working out for you, by the way?" It was true. In 6 months, Marcus had nearly destroyed what our father and grandfather had spent decades building. His arrogance had alienated key partners, his cruelty had driven away the best employees, and his greed had led to several disastrous investments. Whitmore Industries' stock had plummeted. The board was already making noises about removing him. "This isn't over," he snarled. "You're nothing, Emma. You've always been nothing. A few paintings don't change that." "You're right," I said. "I am nothing. Nothing to you, nothing to Dad, nothing to the Whitmore legacy you care so much about. But you know what? I'm okay with being nothing, because nothing is free. Nothing doesn't have to carry the weight of other people's expectations. Nothing can become anything it wants to be." I hung up on him mid-scream. The next few months were a whirlwind. I was invited to speak at museums and universities around the world. Art historians wanted to study the recovered paintings. Journalists wanted to tell my story. And through it all, Marcus's empire continued to crumble. The final blow came when the board of Whitmore Industries voted him out as CEO. They actually approached me, to take over. "You're a Whitmore," they said. "It's your birthright too." I laughed. "No, thank you. I have my own empire to run." And I did. The Emma Rose Whitmore Foundation became one of the most influential organizations in the art world. We didn't just preserve paintings, we funded young artists, especially women who had been told their art didn't matter. We established programs in schools where children could discover their creativity. We proved that art wasn't a frivolous hobby for bored housewives. It was a multi-billion-dollar industry that could change lives. I bought a brownstone in Boston, not far from my grandfather's house. I filled it with art, some famous, some unknown, all meaningful to me. I dated a professor of Renaissance literature who loved me for my mind and never once asked about my money. I traveled the world, not in private jets like Marcus had, but slowly, taking time to really see each place, to understand its art and culture. And yes, I kept the snow globe. It sits on my desk, ugly and beautiful at the same time, a reminder that the smallest gifts really do hold the greatest treasures. Marcus, last I heard, was living in a 2-bedroom apartment in New Jersey, working as a middle manager at a company that had once been a competitor to Whitmore Industries. His wife had divorced him when the money ran out, taking the children with her. He had lost everything: the empire, the fortune, the status, the identity he had built on being better than me. I thought I would feel vindicated when he fell. I thought I would celebrate the way he had celebrated when he thought I had gotten nothing. But when I heard about his circumstances, all I felt was sad. Sad for the brother who could have been, for the relationship we could have had if he hadn't been taught that love was a zero-sum game where someone had to lose for someone else to win. I tried to reach out once. I sent him a letter telling him that I forgave him, that there was room in my life for a brother if he wanted to be one. He sent it back unopened, "Return to sender," written in angry red ink across the envelope. My mother lives with me now. After Marcus lost everything, he blamed her for not warning him, for not fighting for him to get more. He cut her off completely, leaving her with nothing. I took her in without hesitation. She spends her days reading in my library, finally free to enjoy the books she had always loved, but never had time for when she was playing the role of the perfect Whitmore wife. "I don't deserve your kindness," she told me one evening as we sat by the fire, snow falling outside the windows. "Maybe not," I said, "but grandfather believed in giving people more than they deserved. He gave me an empire when everyone thought I deserved nothing. The least I can do is pass that kindness forward." She cried then, the kind of deep, healing tears that wash away years of regret. "He would be so proud of you," she said. "Edward, he would be so proud of who you've become." I looked at the snow globe on the mantel, watching the fake snow swirl around the little Victorian house. Somewhere, across time and space, I like to think my grandfather was watching, smiling, knowing that his plan had worked exactly as he intended. The truth is, Marcus was right about one thing. I did get exactly what I deserved. But what I deserved wasn't nothing. What I deserved was love, respect, and the chance to prove that the quiet daughter in the corner was worth more than anyone imagined. My grandfather knew that. He saw me before I even existed, loved me before I took my first breath, and built me an empire not of corporations and stock options, but of art and beauty and the unshakable knowledge that I had always been enough. The last letter my grandfather ever wrote to me, dated just days before his death, contained a quote from Oscar Wilde. "We are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars." Marcus had inherited the gutter, the grinding machinery of commerce, the brutal arithmetic of profit and loss. But I had inherited the stars, the beauty, the wonder, the possibility that life could be more than a balance sheet. And that, in the end, was the real fortune. Not the money, not the paintings, not even the vindication of being worth more than my brother ever imagined. The real fortune was discovering that I had been loved all along by someone who saw my value when no one else did. The real fortune was learning that sometimes the smallest gifts, a snow globe, a letter, a single act of faith across the generations, really do hold the greatest treasures. I still shake that snow globe sometimes, watching the white flakes swirl and settle. Each time, I remember that moment in the lawyer's office when I thought my worth had been reduced to a $50 trinket. Each time I smile, knowing what Marcus still refuses to understand, that in our family, the one who got nothing got everything that mattered. There's a poetic justice in it, I suppose. Marcus, who had spent his whole life believing he was entitled to everything, ended up with nothing that lasted. And I, who had been told I deserved nothing, inherited an empire built on love. My grandfather, the artist businessman who everyone thought was just playing with paintings before he got serious, had played the longest game of all. He had looked decades into the future and painted a masterpiece of revenge and redemption, with me as both the canvas and the artist. The Emma Rose Whitmore Foundation is now one of the largest private supporters of the arts in the world. We've returned over 300 stolen paintings to their rightful homes. We've funded thousands of young artists, with a special emphasis on those who, like me, were told their dreams didn't matter. We've proven that art isn't just decoration for rich people's walls. It's a vital part of human culture, worth preserving, worth fighting for, worth billions of dollars in economic impact. But my favorite program is the one I started for young women in business families who feel invisible, overlooked, forgotten. We call it the Snow Globe Society, and we meet once a month to share our stories, to remind each other that our worth isn't determined by our fathers or brothers or anyone else who tries to make us small. We teach them to look for the seams, to shake things up, to find the maps hidden in plain sight. Last month, a young woman named Sarah came to our meeting. She was 22, fresh out of college, the daughter of a tech billionaire who had 3 sons he was grooming to take over his empire. Sarah had been given a secretary position in the company, told she should be grateful for even that much inclusion. "I feel like I'm disappearing," she said, tears running down her face. "Like every day I become less and less visible until one day I'll just fade away entirely." I handed her my snow globe. "Shake it," I said. She did, watching the snow swirl with confusion. "That's what it feels like right now," I told her. "Everything's chaotic, unclear, impossible to see through. But watch what happens." We sat in silence as the snow settled, revealing the perfect little house inside. "The chaos always settles," I said. "And when it does, you'll see what was always there, waiting for you. Your grandfather, your father, your brothers. They don't determine your worth. You do. And sometimes the smallest inheritance is actually the key to the greatest fortune." Sarah smiled through her tears, handing the snow globe back to me. "Keep it," I said. "Consider it your first inheritance. And remember, the real treasure is never what they give you. It's what you discover when you look closer." She left that meeting with her head held higher, the snow globe clutched in her hands like a talisman. 3 months later, she called to tell me she had discovered her father had been hiding patents in her name, trying to avoid taxes. Patents that, it turned out, were worth more than the positions he'd given all 3 of her brothers. She's now running her own tech company, funding female entrepreneurs, proving that the invisible daughter was actually the one worth watching all along. That's the thing about snow globes. They look like nothing special, just cheap souvenirs gathering dust on a shelf. But inside, if you look closely, there's an entire world waiting to be discovered. My grandfather knew that. He knew that the daughter everyone overlooked would be the one to look closely, to find the seams, to shake things up and discover the truth. Marcus still refuses to speak to me. I hear about him through mutual acquaintances, how he tells anyone who will listen that I stole his rightful inheritance, that I manipulated our grandfather, that I committed some kind of fraud. But nobody believes him anymore. They've seen the documentation, the letters, the legal proof that everything I inherited was always meant for me. More than that, they've seen what I've done with it versus what he did with his inheritance. I built something lasting. He destroyed everything he touched. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if our father had raised us differently, if he had valued both his children equally, if he had seen my worth alongside Marcus's, if he had taught us to support each other instead of compete. Maybe Marcus would still have his empire. Maybe I would have been content with a smaller role in the family business. Maybe we would have been actual siblings instead of strangers who happen to share DNA. But then I think about my grandfather's letters, about his careful planning, about the empire he built in secret just for me. He didn't do it just because he felt sorry for the granddaughter he would never meet. He did it because he saw something in the patterns of our family history, in the way Whitmore men treated Whitmore women, that needed to be broken. He knew that sometimes the only way to change a system is to work outside of it, to build something new and better in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to bring it into the light. That moment came with a snow globe, ugly and beautiful, worthless and priceless, nothing and everything all at once. I'm 31 years old now, 8 years removed from that day in the lawyer's office when I thought my life was over. I've learned so much since then. I've learned that family isn't about blood. It's about who sees your worth when the world tells you you're worthless. I've learned that inheritance isn't just about money. It's about the stories we tell ourselves about who we deserve to be. I've learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building something so beautiful that their ugliness becomes obvious in comparison. But most importantly, I've learned that every person who has ever been told they're not enough Every daughter who has been overshadowed by a son, every dreamer who has been told to be practical, every artist who has been told to get a real job, every single one of us has a snow globe waiting somewhere. Maybe it's not a literal snow globe with coordinates to a secret fortune. Maybe it's a talent that nobody has recognized yet, a strength that's been dismissed as weakness, a perspective that the world desperately needs but doesn't know it yet. The key is to keep shaking things up, to keep looking for the seams, to keep believing that the smallest gifts can hold the greatest treasures. My grandfather has been dead for over 30 years, but his love lives on in every painting we restore, every artist we fund, every young woman we teach to see her own worth. He reached across time to save a granddaughter he would never meet, and in doing so, he saved not just me, but hundreds of others who needed to know they mattered. That's what real wealth looks like. Not numbers in a bank account, not corner offices in glass towers, not even priceless paintings in climate-controlled storage. Real wealth is the ability to change lives, to right wrongs, to prove that the people the world overlooks are often the ones worth looking at most closely. Marcus got the empire, but empires rise and fall. I got a snow globe, and inside it was a universe of possibility that will outlive us all. The last time I visited my grandfather's grave, I brought the snow globe with me. I set it on his headstone and shook it one more time, watching the snow swirl and settle around the little Victorian house. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for seeing me before I existed. Thank you for loving me before I was born. Thank you for knowing I was worth more than nothing." The wind picked up, rustling the leaves in the old oak trees that surrounded the cemetery. For just a moment, I could have sworn I heard his voice on the breeze. "You were always everything, my dear Emma. They just couldn't see it through the snow." I picked up the globe and walked back to my car, where my mother was waiting. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready," I said, carefully placing the snow globe in my bag, where it has lived every day since that first moment I held it. We drove away from the cemetery, but not away from my grandfather. He's with me every day, in every choice I make, in every life I touch, in every person I remind that they are worth more than the world tells them they are. Marcus got the empire my father built on ambition and greed, but I got the empire my grandfather built on love and faith in a granddaughter he would never meet. And that, it turns out, was worth more than all the Whitmore Industries stock in the world. Sometimes, when young women come to the Snow Globe Society feeling hopeless, feeling worthless, feeling like they'll never be more than the shadow their families cast, I tell them this story. I tell them about the grandfather who loved me before I was born, about the father who never saw my worth, about the brother who thought he had won everything, and about the snow globe that changed it all. And then I tell them the most important part. Your snow globe is out there, waiting for you to find it. It might not look like much. Others might laugh at it, dismiss it, tell you it's worthless. But if you look closely, if you shake things up, if you refuse to accept the value others assign to you, you'll find your real inheritance. And I promise you, it will be worth more than anything they kept for themselves. The Emma Rose Whitmore Foundation now has offices in 12 cities around the world. We've recovered and returned over $1 billion worth of stolen art. We've funded more than 10,000 artists. We've changed the conversation about what art is worth and who deserves to create it. But I'm most proud of the Snow Globe Society. We have chapters in 15 countries now, thousands of women who were told they were nothing, discovering they are everything. Each new chapter starts the same way, with a snow globe, a reminder that the smallest gifts hold the greatest treasures, that what looks like nothing to some people might be everything to the person who knows how to look. Marcus still lives in his 2-bedroom apartment in New Jersey. I've driven by it once or twice, not to gloat, just to see. It's a perfectly nice building, respectable, middle class. The kind of place that would have seemed like a palace to our grandfather when he was starting out with nothing but ambition and artistic talent. The kind of place Marcus would have sneered at when he thought he was inheriting the world. I've thought about reaching out again, about trying one more time to bridge the gap between us, but I know he's not ready. Maybe he never will be. He's still shaking his fist at the snow, unable to see that it has already settled, that the landscape has changed, that the empire he thought was his birthright was always built on shifting ground. But I have hope, not for reconciliation necessarily, but for understanding. Someday, maybe Marcus will realize that there was room for both of us to inherit something meaningful, that our grandfather's love wasn't a finite resource that had to be hoarded, that being a Whitmore could have meant more than stock prices and corporate acquisitions. Until then, I'll keep doing what I do. I'll keep shaking the snow globe, keep looking for the seams, keep finding the treasures hidden in plain sight, because that's what my grandfather taught me from beyond the grave, that love transcends time, that worth isn't determined by others, and that sometimes the smallest gifts hold the greatest treasures. Every morning, I take the snow globe from my bag and set it on my desk. It's scratched now, the plastic base even more obviously fake, the snow inside a little yellowed with age. But it's still beautiful to me. It's still the key that unlocked everything. It's still the proof that I was loved, valued, chosen, long before I knew I needed to be. And every evening, before I pack it away again, I shake it one more time. I watch the snow swirl, chaos and beauty, nothing and everything, the whole universe in a cheap plastic globe, and I smile, knowing that somewhere my grandfather is smiling too, proud of the granddaughter who finally found what he left for her, who finally understood that she was never the lesser child. She was the one he chose. She was the one who got everything that mattered. She was the one who learned that the smallest gifts hold the greatest treasures. And that has made all the difference. End. Thank you for listening to my story. If this story moved you, and if you believe that everyone deserves to have their true worth seen, please like this video and shares it with someone who needs to hear this message. Comment below and tell me, what was the moment in the story that resonated with you the most? And if you want more powerful stories about finding your strength and overcoming the odds, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's next.